Hi, it's Mike with AskTractorMike.com. Well, I've got a viewer letter today asking about how to pick out a Bush Hog. And Bush Hog's a brand name, and in this particular case, that's what the customer is asking about, so we're going to say Bush Hog today. But you might call it a brush hog or a rough cut rotary cutter, whatever you call it. This is going to apply to any time you're looking to buy a rotary cutter to keep your areas that aren't your yard groomed up. And this applies to any brand, any type of cutter. And I'm going to show you the one tool you need to figure out which cutter works for your tractor. And then I'm going to try to help my viewer avoid a pretty critical mistake. So let's get to the letter first. The letter comes from Harold. And Harold says, I have a John Deere 4044M tractor, 43 horsepower, 33.6 at the PTO. And he has a Frontier brush hog. It's all bent up. He wants to get a new cutter, trade it in, doesn't want to heat up the sides to straighten them. He said, would you have insight that you could share with me on what I need to look for? I was looking for a Bush Hog BH216-2. Its PTO horsepower minimum is 30 horsepower, or should I consider the Bush Hog BH215-2 with a PTO minimum of 25 horsepower? I'm new to the tractor thing. And then he goes on to talk about the land he's inherited. It's been in the family forever, and he's going to take care of it. And he does say, I've had the timber cut, and I now just need to keep it cut, which I think he means the timber is cut, so he's just trying to maintain what's left there. And it comes from Harold. Well, Harold, first off, let me show you the number one tool you need to determine which cutter to get. And we've all got one. It's a tape measure. And when you're buying a cutter, the first thing you need to do is find the biggest thing you'll be cutting with that cutter and go measure it. So if you're only cutting grass or material that's up to 1 inch in diameter, there's one grade of cutter to get. If it's 2 inches, there's a different cutter. If it's 3 inches, it's a different cutter, and then you may not have a big enough tractor, and there's a 4-inch model and a 5-inch model. We'll talk about Bush Hog in particular, but if you're talking about any of the other major players in the game, Land Pride, Rhino, Woods, Deere, most of the major players in the game have this same setup. And that is they rate their cutters by how big a material they'll cut, the maximum size material. So if you'll take your tape measure out to wherever you're clearing the ground and measure that biggest sprout that you'll be cutting, you'll know what grade of cutter to get. And for example, with Bush Hog, they've got a 100 series that cuts up to 1 inch material. And then the one Harold's looking at is a 200 series, which cuts up to 2 inch material. They've got a 300 up to 3, a 400, you kind of get the picture, up to a 500 series that will cut up to a 5-inch sprout. Now, the limiting factor, if you're going with the heaviest cutter that'll cut the biggest material, is probably going to be your tractor. Do you have a big enough tractor? And the answer for her, Harold, is no. The 4044M is not a big enough tractor to get any bigger than the Bush Hog 200 series. So his choices are a 100 series that cuts up to 1 inch material, or a 200 series, which cuts up to 2 inch material. So let's assume that Harold is not going to cut anything bigger than a 2 inch sprout. So then he's asking me, do I want a 215, which is a 5-foot cutter, or a 216, which is a 6-foot cutter? The next thing you need to be concerned about is how wide do I get? And you want wider than the back tire tracks. So in other words, if your back tire tracks are 5.5 foot apart, you better get a 6-foot cutter. And in Harold's case, I think that 4044M is going to require a 6-foot cutter. So that narrows your choices down to 2 cutters in the Bush Hog line, the 100 series 6-foot cutter or the 200 series 6-foot cutter. So that got a lot easier. Now let's talk about options on cutters. And this applies pretty much to all brands. When you're selecting a cutter, you're going to need to know what kind of rock protection you want. So you're going to pick, on most cutters, one of 3 types of rock protection. The first one is none, just a big open area there where rocks can come out in any direction. And a lot of cutters are sold that way. It's kind of amazing to me that OSHA or whoever the people are in charge to let that happen. But there's a lot of cutters that have no protection. And that's fine if you're mowing high. My cutter that you see in all my videos has no rock protection whatsoever. No flaps, no chains, no nothing, which are the other two. But I'm mowing high enough, I don't hit rocks. So I don't have projectiles coming at the back of my head, which can be a problem if you're mowing low. So Harold, if you'll pick your height up a little bit and mow at 4 inches or 5 inches, you'll be fine with no rock protection. But if you're gonna mow lower than that, get rock protection. And that can either be a rubber flap across the front and sometimes across the back, or a set of chains. And either one of these will slow down rocks coming out from under the machine. A lot of people go with a rubber flap because it's cheaper. The most expensive thing to get is chains. And the advantage of chains, they allow air to flow under there so you get a little bit prettier cut, but they slow down the rocks that come out. The next thing you want to decide is, do you want a slip clutch or a shear bolt protection for the drive line? Let's say you're running your brush hog across the field and you hit the biggest rock you can imagine, and it's bedrock, it's embedded in the ground, it won't come out. You've got to have protection for your drive line because something has to give. And that'll either be an expensive gearbox or possibly your drive line or your tractor. Yeah, it's possible to snap the PTO shaft, that stub shaft, off the back of your tractor, and we sure don't want that. So by and large, there's two ways of protecting the drive line, and that is a shear bolt or a slip clutch. And the shear bolt's just what it sounds like, and it's what I have on my cutter. It's a bolt in there that is designed to be the weakest link in the chain. So if I run over a stump that I forgot I had in the field, it breaks that shear bolt and then everything just spins. So if you're out in the field and you're mowing with a brush hog, and all of a sudden you hear a thud and you've hit something and your cutter quits, you've sheared a shear bolt, and you got to go find where it is to replace that. If you want to see how mine is replaced, I'll put a link to my video up here where I show that. The other type of protection is a slip clutch. Now, a lot of people don't know inside that slip clutch are discs that have to be maintained. They have to be burned in place or burnished in place once a year. And if you want to see what that looks like, here's a link to a video I did on it. But you've got to do that to maintain those. And if you don't adjust your slip clutch, you've got eventually no protection, because a little moisture will get in there and rust all those discs together. And when that happens, you have no protection whatsoever. So if you're like me and you're not a maintenance person, put that shear bolt in there and you never have to worry about it until you blow it up, you break the bolt, and you have to replace it. But if you're somebody that meticulously maintains your equipment, look at getting a slip clutch, because you'll never have to get off the tractor and replace a bolt. Now, the other options on a brush hog are not that many. Some brush hogs you can get with 1 or 2 tail wheels, and that's generally on a 5 or 6 foot model. Most of them come with 1 tail wheel. I like 1 tail wheel because it's cheaper, and I kind of feel like a little bit more maneuverable. But if you want to spread the weight out, which possibly could give you a little better cut, get 2 wheels. Some cutters you can order either as a single gearbox or a twin gearbox. That's very limited, usually in the 7 foot size. If you're going with a 7 foot cutter, I would strongly consider a 2 gearbox design, because it's not going to stick out as far back from the tractor and try to lift your front end up when you're lifting up the machine. But most cutters come with a single gearbox up to about 7 foot. The one thing I really like, and I don't have, my cutter doesn't have, is a smooth top domed deck. And what those have is the reinforcement is there. It's just in between the top and the bottom. And so your top is smooth. So when you're out brush hogging, and you've got a lot of seeds and debris, it just goes on a flat surface, and you can take a leaf blower and blow it off. Or a lot of times it'll just fall off as you're moving through the field. Your cheaper cutters won't have that. They'll have those ribs on the top because that's cheaper to manufacture. And your debris accumulates in there, and if you don't get it off and you store it outside, they'll rust out the cutter. But I like the dome deck. I don't have it. If I ever trade brush hogs, I will definitely get one with a smooth deck on the top to keep the debris off. But that's the main options I can think of that you look at. Now, a couple of options that I think are way overrated when you're buying a brush hog are the gearbox rating, the amount of horsepower that can go through that gearbox, and the gearbox warranty. And I'll tell you why. Gearboxes generally don't fail if they're maintained. What can happen to fail a gearbox is either you get wire or something underneath the machine that winds around there, or twine, and damages the seal, and all the oil drains out and there's no lubrication, and eventually everything gets hot and you blow up the gearbox that way. Or you overfill the gearbox, which is more common, with too much oil and it gets hot. Or you hit something in the field that doesn't move and your shear bolt is either too big, or if you've got slip clutches, they've not been maintained. And those are the things that will fail a gearbox. And those wouldn't be covered under warranty. So having a 150 or 200 horsepower gearbox on there for a 30 horse or 40 horse tractor with a 5-year or a 10-year or a 50-year gearbox warranty does you no good, because warranty will not cover damage to the gearbox or hitting something in the field that didn't move. So I don't even put any stock at all in those options. So Harold, I hope that helps you out. In your situation, you need to go with 6-foot cutter, and then either the 100 series or 200 series if you're wanting to buy the Bush Hog brand. I appreciate you watching my videos. I'd be honored if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking the mic face icon, and make sure you check the bell so you get notified when I post future videos. Here's the link to my website and the Tractor Fun Store with really cool things for sale for the tractor owner. It helps support my channel, and here's another couple of videos you might want to watch. Thanks for watching.